Representative Kathleen Peters moved to Pinellas County in 1985. She received her BA degree from Eckerd College, majoring in human development, and she currently holds a position of state representative for Florida House of Representatives, District 69. She's also the former VP of Public Affairs at the Clearwater Regional Chamber of Commerce. She's been married to her husband, Mike, for 30 years, which is an accomplishment in and of itself. And she's the mother of 4 sons and 4 grandsons. In the Florida legislature, Representative Peters serves on the Government Operations Appropriations Subcommittee, the Education Committee, Healthy Families Subcommittee, Transportation and Economic Development Appropriations Subcommittee, and the Select Committee on Gaming and the Ethics and Elections Subcommittee. Representative Peters began her political career by serving on the City of South Pasadena's Planning and Zoning Board. She volunteered to serve on a committee. She was then elected to the City Commission in 2008. In June 2009, she was elected by the Commission to serve as the mayor for the remainder of the retiring mayor's term. She was then re-elected mayor in March 2010 and state representative in 2012. She previously served on the board of directors for the Florida League of Mayors, the Pinellas Suncoast Transit Authority, and Pinellas County EMS Advisory Board. She also served on the Florida League of Cities, Growth Management and Transportation Legislative Subcommittee, the American Marine Institute, Pinellas Board of Directors, and the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council. It gives me great pleasure to introduce my representative and friend, Representative Kathleen Peters.
Thank you, Andy. It's always good to be here, and you need to update my committee list because there is no gaming committee this year. Instead, I'm on ports and transportation and economic affairs, which is really exciting because I spent the last 5 years working for the Clearwater Regional Chamber, working on government affairs and how it relates to business. And that was a perfect job for a state legislator, one who's passionate about economic development and making sure that people have jobs. So that was a wonderful fit for me. Andy asked me if I would come and talk to you about civic duty and leadership. And I will tell you, this is so important to me. And I take this on even more personally in my personal life, even than my regular career life. When I started, I can tell you 10 years ago, if anybody would have said I was going to be in government, I would have said they were out of their mind. My whole life, I have hated politics. I absolutely hated politics. I come from the Chicago areas where I grew up, so I've never trusted government, ever. So how did I end up here? I ended up here because it started a long time ago. I went to college a lot later than most of you did. I waited till I was pregnant with my 4th child before I decided I would try college. But I ended up doing an internship at an organization, and I was always involved with my kids. You know, I always did Cub Scouts, and I was the soccer mom and the classroom mom and all that stuff because I was blessed to be able to stay home with my children. And so I was really involved in their school and community things. And my mother was that way, so it was natural to me. I thought that's what we were supposed to do. So I go to college later, and I do an internship at a Children's Service Council. Now, there aren't that many in the state. There's only 7 or 8 of them. And they're a standalone taxing authority. Not all of them are standalone, but the one in Pinellas County, the Juvenile Welfare Board, is a standalone taxing authority that a judge created close to 80 years ago, because when he would see juvenile delinquents back in, 80 years ago, there was no place to divert children. And St. Petersburg was a retirement community, and there was no place if these kids were unsupervised and getting in trouble, all he had was jail. So he created this taxing authority to fund youth programs so that children, he would always have a place to send them, and that there would always be programs to help keep them busy so they weren't on the street getting into trouble. And so that's a wonderful entity that we have. It's a great asset in our community. And so I served there doing an internship, and the University of Pennsylvania had got a grant and asked us if we would lead an initiative in the state of Florida to reform the juvenile justice laws in the state of Florida, because behind California, they're the worst in the nation. So that was my job. the executive director hired me, and this was my job. I had to take it on. And when I started learning how bad the laws were, I was outraged, absolutely outraged. And then later I took a job at the YMCA. Now the YMCA doesn't do much in juvenile justice, so you're wondering what the heck does this have to do with anything? Except that I was recruited to go and work there, and the CEO said to me, I want you to work for me if you're still passionate about juvenile justice. Have at it. I don't care. It's not a fit for the YMCA. You know, we're early learning. We're health and wellness. We really aren't juvenile justice, but if that's where your passion is, don't lose it. And so I was working locally on the Juvenile Justice Council, and I found that as we were doing our strategic plan, we found that the juvenile crime rate in Pinellas County was incredibly high, and it flew in the face of research, because research said that juvenile crime goes up between the hours of 3 and 6 and 4 and 7. And I'm getting on a soapbox, so I'm going to wrap it up. Anyways, what we found is that 18% of all juvenile crime in Pinellas County was disruption of school environment, and the kids were getting arrested in school. And then we found out that the next 18% was disorderly conduct on school property. So more than 36% of the juvenile crime in my county was happening during school hours, and that when we finally let our children go home, where most of them would be unsupervised in middle school, our juvenile crime rate dropped 32%. That doesn't make much sense now, does it? And so as mother of 4 sons, I was angry. I was really angry that these children that get arrested in school for horseplay or cursing at a teacher can never be a policeman. They can never be a firefighter. They can't join the military. And they have to put on their college application. You're taking away their hope, and they're 10, 11, 12 years old. And that's just not okay. And so I got really angry, and that's when I got involved. But it shouldn't take till someone gets angry. So I got angry, and I ended up creating a program that was extremely successful. And because it was so successful, people started pushing me and said, you need to, if you could do that because you're a pissed off mom. Imagine what you could do if you had a title behind you that might open up a door or two. So I got pushed into politics. I really didn't want to do it, but I got pushed. And so I started putting my toe in the water by just getting on a board. And then from there, I got nudged into running for city commission. And 15 months later, the mayor resigned, and next thing I knew, I was the mayor. That wasn't my plan. It just happened. And then 3 years later, I had 3 representatives come to me and ask me to run for the House of Representatives. And I thanked them, and I said, it's good to be mayor. I'm good. It's kind of good to be mayor. And then I got a call from a senator, and he was rather abrupt and forceful. And next thing I knew, I was running for the House of Representatives, and here I am. I can tell you, it's one of the most proudest things I've ever done. And it is not because of the title. I could care less about titles. But when I want to take on something that is really important to this community, and I know I can leave a legacy, and I know that I truly have made a difference. I've lived a life of purpose. And I've done some wonderful things, and my children have been wonderful, but the day you do something when you know you clearly, truly, your life had purpose and you made a difference, there is nothing more rewarding in this whole world than that. And so I implore you to get actively involved in your community, because the rewards are so much greater than any of the energy and time and money that you put into it. I promise you. I once interviewed a millionaire who gave a several $million gift to a YMCA, and I said to him, that was a stop and think gift. It was $5 million. I don't care how much money you have. $5 million to me is a stop and think gift, And he looked at me and he said, I got back so much more than I gave. So it doesn't matter if it's money or if it's time or your talents. It's really so rewarding. So I created that program, and I knew I was saving and changing the lives of thousands of children every single day in middle school, and none of them knew it, and it didn't matter. It was great. And then last year I championed a bill for homeless, but before I did that, I I got a bunch of partners together, and this had nothing to do with legislation. No tax dollars went into it. But when I found out, if I were to ask you who the majority of the homeless people are in the state of Florida, raise your hand. How many of you think it's that dirty guy on the street corner, you know, the chronic homeless that you see on the street corner in the parks? Raise your hand. How many of you think that's the majority? Okay. You would say that's the majority of them? What if I were to tell you there's 93,000 homeless people in the state of Florida, and more than 63,000 of them are children? 63,000. Now, so many people think that homeless are these guys that are drunk and don't want to get a job, and they're just lazy and they'd rather have booze or drugs, right? And that's people's perception. But if we were to shift people's perception to let them truly understand that the majority of the homeless are invisible, they never see them, and 2/3 of them are children, do you think people would have a different attitude and they'd more likely volunteer in homeless situations and help ensure that these children have a safe place and they have the basic needs of food and shelter, because right now they don't. And we'll never fix our human trafficking problem if we don't fix that feeder system of 63,000 children living on the street. So I created a homeless education campaign. I partnered with the Art Institute of Tampa. And wow, they have put together this incredible campaign for me. The first year we won 7 Addie Awards for that campaign. Not one penny, nothing in cash went into this campaign. Everything was in kind. No tax dollars, everything was in kind. And the cable companies and the billboard companies and the college all did this in kind, and we covered the entire state during the month of April, because my homeless bill was up on the floor during the month of April. It was going through the process, both in the House and the Senate. And so the cable companies promised me, as did the billboard companies, that they would saturate the Tallahassee market in the state of Florida with the messages about our children being homeless. And so that bill passed unanimous both in the House and Senate, and I'm very proud of that. And so this year I'm taking on mental health. And I will tell you, when I ran for office, mental health and homeless were never on my agenda. They weren't even in my top 25. But I had people come to me and tell me how important it was. And I'll tell you, when I get this mental health reform bill passed, hopefully we will have fewer daddies throwing their babies off of bridges. Hopefully we'll have fewer campus shootings. Hopefully we'll have less children committing suicide. And the last one that happened in my community was a young man who decapitated his mother. And all too often, suicide by cop. And so we need to fix it. Right now, Florida is 49th in the nation per capita for funding for mental health. We have a crisis, and I believe we're in crisis. And so what I'm doing right now, because it's so important, and I feel that our legislature needs more young people actively involved. So I have been, and there's several women in the Tampa Bay area that are helping me. We are recruiting people to serve on the gubernatorial boards and on city boards, county boards, because we think it is so critically important, whether it be a corporate board, a nonprofit board, or a government board. I'd like to see more women, quite frankly, on government boards. I think that might help lend itself to get them more actively involved in running. But every quarter I ask the governor's office for a new updated vacancy list for gubernatorial appointments, because I think it's critically important that your voice and your voice and your voice is heard up here in the state in areas where you have some expertise. And that way you can represent the community you come from, but also represent the state and make sure that we have good policies and good regulations within all of those industries. And it's no different in the local city boards or county boards. And when I was first starting out, I didn't know how to get on those boards. I was like, how do you do that? I mean, I know these people, they're all high CEO leaders, but what I came to find out is some of the best leaders in my community weren't CEOs. They often didn't even have titles. I found some of the strongest leaders that we have in my community were from neighborhood associations. if you think about it, if you're actively involved in your neighborhood association or even if you're in condos, those leaders, I mean, they step up, they have a job every day, and yet they are so committed to their community, and they're great leaders. I mean, they are great leaders. You don't have to have a title to be a great leader, and I think that's a misconception. And so if you're willing to help me change that, that's what I'm looking for, are great leaders that aren't necessarily CEOs, that are willing to serve their community and their state. And I think it is so incredibly important because the more you do that, just like I started with being a pissed off mom, if I can reform Florida's mental health system, I know that I've left this life a long-lasting legacy that's going to help people forever, and I don't care if my name is on it, as long as it's done. And so good, strong leaders are what we need. They're the key to our future. And those that stand silent are not the ones, I mean, we really, truly, we do. We need you. We need every single one of you. And so I encourage you, and if you don't want to be on a board, if you're already on boards, help me recruit people that you think would be great leaders that want to be on boards. Help me recruit them. Help your representatives in your communities. Make sure they meet them so they can nominate them to be on these boards. Same thing at your local government. Local government is so rewarding. I think my favorite is local government because you so quickly get to see what you accomplish. It's material right there, and you really see it. A lot of times it's infrastructure, and nobody knows how important those sewers are except your your city workers. But boy, when they break down, it's a big problem, and it's way more important than most people think. And the first time I got elected city, I spent 6 months learning about sewers, had no idea that sewers would bankrupt most cities, and they're critically important to our basic need in life. So instead of talking anymore, I'd rather take questions. You have any questions? Did I hit that civic duty leadership thing enough? Because I know that was what I was assigned to talk about, but I'm hoping I really truly expressed it well. Any questions? Great.
Just because you're so active and you're so vocal about your passion for the community, do your kids feel the same way? Were they involved when they were growing up?
It's funny. They're kind of coming of their own. I have a couple late bloomers. But, my son, Christopher, ran for the House of Representatives when he was 24 years old. He had gotten laid off. He had just graduated from college, and he got laid off, and it was just kind of the beginning of the recession. And he was so angry that a woman who was running dropped out 6 weeks before the election, and he said, that is just wrong. People need a choice. And he's yelling at me to run. I'm already a city commissioner. I'd have had to resign, and I couldn't have had my name on the ballot, and I'm thinking he's crazy. And he was so passionate. He's a lot like his mama. That one, the apple didn't fall too far from the tree. And so he ran for the House of Representatives before I ever had an inkling to do it. My second son is a firefighter paramedic, and he is a public servant every day. My other two are kind of late bloomers, and they just don't know what it is that they want to do. But, they went and knocked on doors for me this last campaign, and every time they'd come back, they would be energized because they knew when they would talk about me with other people and they could talk about the things that I've been able to accomplish and what I want to accomplish in the future, they'd be just jacked up. And I love working with grassroots campaign folks because until you've done it, it's exhausting, it's hard work. But the joy is when you start talking about something you believe in or someone you believe in. It's really exciting, and it's not something I can explain to you until you live it, because it doesn't make any sense otherwise. Knocking on doors you'd think would be horrible, but when you're all done, it's usually a great experience because people are passionate about what they're passionate about. And when you get to have conversations with them, you learn so much. So my children, yes, but some of them are dragging their feet a little bit. But I imagine once they mature a little bit more, my youngest just turned 21, and my other one is 24. And I think when they're all done with school and stuff, we'll see a lot of that.